Hey guys, how's it going? Today's video is going to be my wrap-up for the JKRreadathon. If you don't know, a couple weeks ago I did a 24-hour readathon on J.K. Rowling's birthday to celebrate her birthday by reading trans books by trans authors to basically tell her to go fuck herself and stop being a TERF. My initial plan was to do a reading vlog, and that didn't quite work out. I ended up losing like half the footage and the audio was just cutting in and out really bad for a lot of it. I think it's because I was rushed and I just didn't like check that everything was okay before I started recording, and yeah, so I spent a couple weeks trying to salvage the video, and then I just decided I'm just gonna accept defeat, and instead I'm gonna do a wrap-up, but I'm gonna kind of make it more like casual wrap-up, like more chatty. But I ended up reading 5.5 books, which is amazing. I am so excited and I loved most of them. So let's just get right into it. I'm going to go in order that I finished them, so that's what I'm going to do. The first book I finished was Out of Salem by Hal Schrieve, who is a gender-fluid trans man and uses Z and here pronouns. This is the story of a genderqueer teenager who ends up becoming a zombie when they're in an accident and their entire family is killed. They end up coming back as a zombie, and now they have to live with this elderly lesbian witch, and they become friends with a werewolf, and now there's murders and they have to help solve it, and it is a wild ride. As far as rep goes, like I said, the main character is genderqueer and the secondary character is a lesbian, Muslim, and plus-sized. There's also multiple people of color as side characters and other queer people and other trans rep. The trigger warnings for this book are death of family, I would say soft gore, like not necessarily gory, but the main character is a zombie and sometimes their body falls apart in certain ways, and that's described. It's not in a gruesome way, but if you're sensitive to that stuff, it could be triggering. There's also homophobia, fat phobia, racism, and bullying with all of those three things. There are thoughts of suicide, but it's handled in a different way because in this world, zombies are slowly dying when the magic that holds them together slowly comes undone. So the main character, because they know that their body is going to just fall apart soon and they might become like a flesh-eating type zombie, they do consider ending things. So it is suicidal thoughts, but not in the way it's usually presented. And the final trigger, and what I would consider the biggest trigger, is police brutality. In this world, magic exists, magic has always existed. I think they said that Hemingway was a werewolf and just like things like that, but most people categorize all of the monsters into the same category and say that they're violent, dangerous, etc. Specifically, werewolves are targeted in this one, and people think that they should be documented and regulated and very strictly controlled, and there are very radical protests against the werewolves. There's a couple scenes of police breaking into people's homes and death by police officer, so if that's something that you're sensitive to, definitely be very mindful of that because that is a very prevalent theme in this book. Overall, I did really enjoy it. I wish that the world building would have been a little bit stronger in the beginning because going into it, I didn't know how accepted and prevalent magic was. Like the main character being a zombie, I didn't know, is that weird? Are there normally zombies? Is this completely abnormal? Like, what do people want to think? Also, what kind of zombie? Like, are they just themselves but dead, slightly rotten, flesh-eating? Like, I just didn't know the parameters of the world, but it's essentially our world, but with magic and monsters, and all of those things have always existed. So that just would have been a little bit better to know at the beginning. I would have been able to get into the story a little bit more. One thing that I absolutely loved, though, is our main character, Z. I just think they're just so adorable. There's just something so innocent and like bumbling about them because their body is falling apart and they just sometimes can't walk, so they just fall over, and it's just described in such a humorous way. Overall, this book was really funny. Like, Z's caretaker is an elderly lesbian witch, and because she's so old, people just keep assuming she's gonna drop dead at any moment. Like, they keep saying that she may not be fit to be a guardian, and not because they think that this single woman can't, you know, raise a zombie, but because she's really old and, you know, you never know when she could just drop dead. And just the way that is presented is really funny to me. I also thought it was really cute because Z is only first kind of starting to discover their identity and experimenting with pronouns and a new name, so you kind of get to see like the early stages of that process. Like when they're first asking people to call them Z, some people are like, oh, Z, like that's a cute nickname, and they're like, well, it's not quite a nickname, it's like a new name, but like could you just like call me that? And even some of the teachers at school are trying to be like cool about it. They're like, oh yeah, Z, gotcha. And some people think it's like a punk rock thing, and it's just cute in the way that they're just learning all these things and like trying to figure out what makes them the most comfortable. Like overall, the writing style and the friendship and everything about this was just super cute and fun. It had a lot of really strong social commentary, and you know, they're saying that they're against like werewolves, but you know that it's all a giant metaphor for racism and just the way that some things are explored, and it was just really well done. The one thing that I didn't like about this was the ending. I thought the ending was really weak. Honestly, I kept forgetting that I had finished the book because it didn't end. Like, I feel like we got to halfway through the climax and then the book is just over. Like, nothing is wrapped up. We have no idea what happens. There's just a big event and they're in the process of figuring out, oh, what was that? And then it's over. And it's not done in a cliffhanger way. It's done in a really unsatisfying way. Like, I genuinely thought that I was just missing part of the book, and it was just really, really weird, way too abrupt, and I would have enjoyed the book a lot more if it just would have ended. Like, I feel like we only got 3/4 of the way through the story. So that definitely kind of took my enjoyment down a little bit, but overall the book as a whole was really fun. Next, I read a poetry collection, and that is Why Death Shall Never Settle Upon the Soul by Ryka Aoki. She is a trans woman who uses she, her pronouns, and she's also Japanese American. Like I said, this is a poetry collection, and I love this. This was a 10 out of 10. This is the best poetry collection I think I've ever read. I mentioned this before, but I'm a very big fan of really emotional poetry. I don't read poetry for the story, I read it for the emotional impact, and this just had so many strong lines that just really just hit me, and it was just so moving. I would say trigger warnings for this one is mentions of like death and grief and loss, not outright, but just in the overall tone and themes of the poems. Most of them are centered around queerness, and just, it's so impactful. Like, I cannot wait to reread it and tab it up with my favorite lines, but I know it's going to be completely tabs. I stopped myself from tabbing it up as I went because I knew that I was just going to tab up everything, and I just wanted to read it once all the way through and just like experience it. And then the other line here, I had to sit and read this like 5 times in a row and just sit afterwards because, I don't know, just something about it, something about the whole poem, but something about like this line or paragraph, whatever, was just so I'm gonna read it out. It says, revolution, a blood sport, because dead queers are easier to pray to, because they don't talk back and kill the buzz. Like, that just hit me. Like, honestly, so much of this just hit me really, really hard, and I cannot wait to read more by this author. She just has a way with words and with impact and emotion. Like, there was just something that I fell head over heels in love with, and I definitely would love to pick up anything else that she writes. The next book I finished was Pet by Akwaeke Emezi, who is non-binary and uses they, them pronouns, and they are also black. This story takes place in a utopian society where they've basically weeded out all evil, violence, all monsters, and our main character is a young girl who ends up accidentally bringing a monster to life out of one of her mother's paintings, and this monster is a literal monster who says that all of the so-called monsters, aka evil humans, were not actually eradicated, and there is still evil in the world, and they have to go stop them. For Rep, this features an all-black cast. The main character is a trans girl. She also has selective mutism and communicates quite a lot through sign language, which is something that I don't think I've ever read before. Hi! And there's also polyamorous Rep. The main character's best friend has 3 parents, and one of them uses they, them pronouns. For trigger warnings, there is implied rape and pregnancy by rape. And the final trigger warning is definitely a spoiler, but because it's a trigger warning, I'm still going to say it. If you really don't want any spoilers at all, then skip ahead 30 seconds. But the final trigger warning is for implied pedophilia and sexual abuse of a child. It doesn't go into any details, you don't know exactly what happens, but the text makes it very clear that that is what happened. Overall, I really loved this book. Honestly, it's the kind of utopian society that almost just makes me so aware of our society's flaws, like the best friend who has 3 parents, and just how nonchalant they are about it in this, and how that's just accepted. Like, even if that was fully accepted by everyone in our society, it would still be seen as abnormal. It would still be looked at and scrutinized, and it just kind of makes me sad that our world is so far from this. Oh no, I'm being attacked! Oh no! And also, when the main character came out as trans, she was really young, I think like 4 or 7 or something like that. And like I said, she is selectively mute. It was right after either a family friend or a family member had said that they were going to grow up to be such a handsome boy or something like that, and she just screamed out that she's a girl, she's not a boy. And the way that it was handled by her parents was just so unlike it would be in our world. But she was crying and her parents just picked her up and apologized and said that they didn't know, and immediately, were using she, her pronouns, and immediately, just were raising her as the girl that she was. And it's just something that is so accepted in this utopian society, and it just really makes you realize how shitty our society is. Like, I know this is fantasy, but acceptance shouldn't be only in fantasy novels, and it just kind of, I don't know, I just got really emotional. Unfortunately, again for this book, I really wasn't a big fan of the ending. I found it was a little bit too quick. I didn't quite like some of the choices that were made. I didn't mind it nearly as much as Out of Salem, but it was a very mediocre ending for me. But aside from that, I really enjoyed the rest of the story. It was cute but impactful, and she said so many nice messages, and the main character and the monster, their like friendship type thing, whatever it was just so cute. I love monster characters. Monsters are always my favorite, and I just loved their dynamic so much and the rest of the story, and just overall this book was definitely very good. The next book I finished was Clean by Juno Dawson. She is a trans woman who uses she, her pronouns. This is the story of a rich, like, celebrity heiress who ends up almost overdosing and going to rehab, and basically it's just her in rehab and all these other fucked up characters, and just her dealing with all of that. And as far as rep goes in the cast of secondary characters, hello Comet. Like I was trying to say, for rep, our cast of secondary characters includes a couple people of color, trans rep, queer rep, there's a character who is plus sized, and there's a bunch of different mental health type rep. As far as trigger warnings go though, there are a lot of them. I actually wrote them down on a post-it note that I'm going to read off because there were so many I worried I was going to forget them. Drug and alcohol abuse and addiction, overdose. The main character's thoughts are very transphobic, fatphobic, racist, overall just bigotry, eating disorders, specifically anorexia and food addiction, sexual content, attempted rape and molestation, toxic relationships, suicidal thoughts, relapse, and death. Honestly, our main character is a terrible person. She is so mean and self-centered and a bully. The way that she looks down on poor people, the way that she talks about and thinks about the other people in the rehab facility, like, she is a bad person. And I really like that we got to see everything through the lens of that character, because we got to see all of this problematic behavior without it being like excused for it. Like, they don't try to glorify any of these things or make excuses for her. It's just kind of presenting the realities of these situations. Hi Comet, hello. As an example of what I mean, I tabbed her first impression of the trans character, and this kind of just sums her up. The skinny girl's smile broadens. Wow, rock and roll. Huh, interesting. I think she might be trans. It's in the voice. Straw jawline. Kendall, once Goldstein, make-believe name, definitely trans. And that's basically her attitude. Honestly, she's a piece of shit. She treats everyone around her like shit. She's entitled and just, terrible. But I think she is the perfect main character for this type of story, because this story is really just exposing all of the darkness and all of the dark underbellies to everything and how fucked up so many people are. And I think that you needed a main character like this to be able to kind of expose the reader to all of these terrible thoughts without giving it an excuse. The one thing that I didn't quite connect with in this story is, like I said, she's like a celebrity heiress, and there's a bunch of other celebrities, and it's very tied to current like pop culture and celebrity stuff, and I don't follow that kind of thing, so some of the references I didn't get. Like, they mention real brands and real celebrities, and none of the characters are real celebrities, but they talk about going to parties and, they're name dropping all these people that were there. I don't think it was done in a bad way, just based off of what I usually read and what I like, it was a little bit jarring. But overall, the messages in this story were so good. The writing was so punchy, it was so, like, choppy sometimes, but in a good way. And there's just something about that just really adds something to the writing style. Like, there's something about the way that it makes it flow, and it almost reads more like you're really in this girl's head and you're really just seeing all of these things and all of her thoughts, and it's, I don't know, there's just something about it that I just really, really loved, and it really just made everything come to life. And luckily, this book broke my streak of unsatisfying endings that I've been having lately. I really liked the ending of this. It was a little bit cheesy in parts, but I really like how the part that I was expecting to be the ending wasn't, and there was just something that was just really satisfying about that. I'm obviously not going to go into any details because spoilers, but I just really like some of the outcomes and how some of the characters ended up, and I like how many things we didn't get answers for, because even though I wanted them, it makes sense because the journeys aren't over, and I just like that some things were just ended because she stopped talking to that person. So you don't know what happens to their life. You don't know if they get a happily ever after because you're not gonna know. You know, you're leaving rehab. You're not gonna stay in touch with all of these people. They're gonna go try to live their lives. You're gonna go try to live yours, and you're all just gonna do your best and lose touch, and that's life. And there was just something really well done about that, and I just really loved it. I found it was really real and raw and gritty and emotional and dark in all the right ways. And I definitely loved this book, and I cannot wait to read the rest of the books I have by this author. I have 2 more books, but I'm going to mention the one that I haven't finished yet, and that is Gender Failure by Ivan E. Coyote and Ray Spoon. They're both non-binary and use they/them pronouns. This is autobiographical and is basically a collection of stories, poems, snippets, pictures, like so much collections of different types of media, basically telling the stories of their lives. I would say the trigger warnings for this one are intentional misgendering, overall unacceptance, and implied death and cancer. I've only read about half of this so far, but I'm really, really loving it. Honestly, you can really tell that both of the authors are songwriters because there's just something in the way that they write that, I don't know, you can tell that they're used to thinking of words in that way. There's something almost lyrical about the writing, and even in some sections that it kind of feels more like a diary entry. It's almost because it's so different from what they usually write that it's more like raw, if that makes sense. I didn't know of either of the authors before I started reading this book, but I really like them, and I think I'm gonna go check out some of their music because if this is the kind of thing that they write, I'm really interested to know how they express themselves through music because I think that that would be really interesting to see. I think that would be kind of up my alley. I also love the way that they just share snippets of their life, like whether it's talking about an experience that they had, a friend they used to know, how they kind of discovered themselves. There's one chapter of when one of the authors is explaining how they retired from gender, and that's how they kind of phrased coming out as non-binary, and I just really loved that. There's something about that that just, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. And they're talking about how they kind of struggled with their gender and how growing up they saw the different things and just their experience overall and all of these different parts of their life, and it's just really, really fun so far. Definitely very good. Like I said, I'm only about halfway through, but I do plan to be finishing this hopefully by the end of the week. And the final book that I finished is Dreadnought by April Daniels. This is the first book in the Nemesis series. April Daniels is a trans woman who uses she/her pronouns. This is the story of a young closeted trans girl who ends up witnessing the most famous superhero in the world die right in front of her and ends up absorbing his powers, quickly being transformed, physically transformed, into the girl that she's always been meant to be, and now has superpowers and suddenly transitioned and has to deal with all of that, and also there's the murderer who killed the superhero out, and this is so up my alley. I freaking love this. As far as rep goes, our main character is trans and a lesbian. The secondary character is Latina, and it's implied that she's bisexual, but it hasn't been outright said yet. There are also other people of color and queer characters. The trigger warnings for this, though, is abusive families, specifically verbal and emotional abuse, homophobia and transphobia, also specifically a lot of slurs. Pretty much every homophobic and transphobic slur you can think of is used against this main character. There's also intentional misgendering and intentional dead naming, and overall just unsupportive families, people not believing her. There's kind of outing without consent, but it's done a bit differently, because at that point in the story, she's already transitioned and living completely as a girl, but her parents still think that it was an accident, that she got turned into a girl, and she has said that she doesn't necessarily want to change back, but she hasn't actually come out and said that it's because she's trans, and then she gets outed as trans, so it's a different type of outing, but still being outed without consent. There's also some gore, especially near the end, and there's talks of what I would consider unhealthy thoughts as far as eating and weight goes. I'll go into details in a minute, but it's not quite an eating disorder, it just seems to be kind of heading in that territory. First of all, I have to say, I love Danny so much. I just want to just pick her up and hug her and protect her from everything because she is just too good for this world. And I got so attached and invested. Like, I cried so many times while reading this. I cried when something good happened to her because I was so excited for her. I cried when she did something good because I was so proud of her. I cried when people were mean to her and when she got hurt and betrayed, and I just felt everything that this character felt, and it was just absolutely mind-blowing. I really don't think I've had such a strong connection with a character. I also really love the way that her trans identity and her transition was explored, because when she inherited the superhero's powers, it explained this pretty early on in the story, but basically inheriting that superhero's powers transforms you into your ideal version of yourself. So for her, being trans, she was able to fully transition into the woman that she's always been meant to be. And at first she's kind of happy that it seems like she's kind of getting the easy way out. Like, all of a sudden people can see that she's a girl, and it's kind of like she just doesn't have to come out, but people are still wondering what happened and why, and they're trying to change her back. And now she has to deal with all of that, plus all the sudden transphobia that she was not prepared for, and it's just really well explored, I think. I also loved the way that this explored toxic masculinity and feminism and just how society views women. Like, at one point when she realizes that the reason why she transitioned is because the superpowers made her her ideal version of herself. Earlier on, she's kind of thinking that she looks a lot like the swimsuit models and stuff that she sees in magazines, and when she realizes that she's just become her ideal version of herself, she kind of feels a little bit gross that her perfect version of herself is based off of these societal beauty standards and not, you know, how she truly felt or how she truly kind of sees herself, but just, you know, her being a woman and picturing the stereotypical beautiful woman and just kind of exploring that and how that made her feel. And one thing that is explored, and I don't know if it's going to be explored more later on or if it's just like a one-off thing, but when she goes to the cafeteria the first time after transitioning, she goes and she picks up a couple slices of pizza, and all of a sudden she kind of thinks like, oh wait, I have this perfect body now. Should I be, you know, overeating and potentially, you know, ruining this perfect body that I have and how I'm just so stereotypically beautiful and socially accepted as, you know, fit and all of this stuff? Like, maybe I should eat less. And it's that kind of thought process that is just, I think, really calling out a lot of the problems that we have in society, and I think they just explored it in a really understandable way and in a really genuine way. It also honestly broke my heart because I just want her to be happy. You know, she's getting everything she ever wanted, and I just don't want people to ruin that for her, and they do because people are shit. And it just breaks my heart that she is such a good person. Like, she's constantly berating herself, and her internal monologue is just how stupid she is and how useless she is. Like, she's brand new to these superpowers, and when she makes a mistake, it's completely understandable. She's never flown before, but she beats herself up so much for it, and you just see that so heavily, and it's heartbreaking because as we read it, we see her actions, we see her thoughts, we know that she is such a good person and she is trying so hard to help as many people as possible, but anytime she messes up, she's just going at herself about how she's not a good person and how she doesn't deserve this and how it's selfish of her to want to do this and how it's selfish of her to keep the powers, and it's just so heavy. This book is just everything that I wanted and more, and I just absolutely fell in love, and I cannot wait for the sequel. I just want to see Dani grow up to be a beautiful young woman, and I just want the world for her because I just love her so, so much. So there you have it. Those are the 5.5 books that I read for my 24-hour readathon. That was so great. I loved all of the books that I read. I found a couple of new favorites. I found a couple of new favorite authors that I'm really excited to check out their other work. Honestly, this went better than I ever dreamed it would. I didn't expect to be able to read so much and to love so many books and to just fall so head over heels in love. I definitely think that I'm going to make this an annual thing. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button to let me know, and subscribe to stay up to date with the rest of my videos. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, usually reading or writing related. So I hope to see you guys next time, and until then, have a great day. Bye!